Hello, everybody. In this video, we're going to talk about the errors that we face in Microsoft Excel while we are working or doing our calculations. And actually, this is a very, very common thing that almost everybody who uses Microsoft Excel would face. That you are working, and while you're working, you write something wrong, you face an error message or a mistake that you did. And some people freak out when they see something like this and feel that they are messing up with everything. And actually, it's pretty normal to face these kind of things. And the errors that show up when you're working with Excel are giving you some clues about the mistake that you did and how you can fix it. And this is what we are going to talk about in this video. So to get a sense of what we are gonna do, I'm calculating y and z from these equations. They're both functions of x. So y equals 5 ln x, and this is x equals 10, just any number. And then y it's 5 multiplied by ln x, and this is z equals 15 over x. I'm just copying it here because I'm gonna need it one more time. So this is what we're gonna use to show the errors that we face. So the first error that or there is one error before going into the calculation. I personally do not believe that this is an error, but something that makes people uncomfortable. So I'm just gonna mention it. So let's say we wanna show today's date. So use this function, you press enter, and you see this hashes. And these hashes it's not a problem actually, because you can do some calculations based on this and still gives you an output. And this means that there's nothing wrong with the formula that you typed here. The only issue here is that the width of the column is very narrow compared to the text that you want to show. That's why it gives you this. So if you increase the width a little bit, it will just give you the input or the output that you want to see. So this is not actually an error. It's just let you know that the space is not enough. But anyways, people like to call it as an error. But anyways, so let's go to the errors, the actual errors that we will face. So the first thing is that you would for instance, put 0 instead of 10. And if you do this, you will face two errors actually, not only one error. The second is very, very understandable. It gives you a message telling you that you are dividing by 0, because it's 15 divided by x is 15 divided by 0, which is doesn't have any meaning. So when I see this an error message like this, I would think of the denominator. I would go and see what I have in the denominator and which part of it is 0. And if I can fix it, then the error should be done. But this is not the same. This error shows, which is the num, tells you that there is no number that can get out of the formula that you type. And this is because mathematically there is no output. Because mathematically there is no len of 0. It doesn't have any meaning. The len should be a positive number. If you put it as -1, this z can be calculated, but this still cannot be calculated. It's exactly like calculating the square root of -1. It's giving you the same error because there is nothing like this in Excel. Of course, there are complex numbers that other software can deal with, but MATLAB, Excel does not know how to deal with it. So if you find something like this, you need to think of the arguments or the inputs to the functions that you are using in your formula, because there is some formula that has an input that does not give an output for this specific formula. So these are the first two errors. I would do the write the formulas again, because the next two errors are related to the way we write the formula. So let's say I wrote it is 5 multiplied by ln x, and by mistake I put an I in the ln instead of ln directly, and I did this. So it's gonna give you this error, which is name. And to understand what does it mean to Excel, it says the formula contains an unrecognized text. Something that you wrote in the formula is not understandable by Excel. So this is because you wrote something that is not a known formula to the software. So in a case you see an error message like this, you need to go back and revise the formulas that you wrote and the functions that you put, and make sure that you put the right spelling of the functions. The next error is that when you are calculating z, you are dividing 15 by x, and of course you know that you want to divide it by 10, but it's very common that while you're writing the formula you would put x instead of 10, and this is a very common mistake. And when you do this, it's gonna give you this error, which is value error. It tells you that the value used in the formula is the wrong data type. You are putting an input that does not work for the formulas that you are using, or for the equation that you are using. So in this case, you need to make sure that the inputs that you are writing are the proper inputs for the functions that you are trying to use. So these are 4 or 5 errors now. And now let's go for the next one. And the next one is very common for engineering applications, actually, when you are, especially when you're doing some iterative solutions. And let's say for a very common case, when you are doing material balance for a system with the recycle stream, and you are tearing and you're recalculating the stream from the initial value that you put. So it's very common to have a variable that you are calculating from another variable, and then the other variable is calculated from the first variable. So you're having a loop. And in this case, for instance, you are calculating z from x, and you are calculating x as 2 multiplied by z. So it's going to give you an error message said that you have what's called a circular reference, where a formula refer to its own cell either directly or indirectly. So you're calculating this from this, and this is calculating from the very first cell. So it's kind of having a circular reference, and it gives you, and it's very clear. It gives you this arrow with the 2 cells connecting the 2 cells, telling you that these 2 cells contain formulas that have a circular reference. Of course, it can be not a direct case like this. You can calculate x, y from x, and then z from y, and then l from z, and then x from l. So it doesn't have to be direct 2 cells directly like this, and it's gonna give you the same thing now if you have this case. So these are the first 5 errors. To go to the next error, let's go to this sheet. So this sheet we used before in a previous video, to calculate the vapor pressure of a component. And to calculate the vapor pressure, we used the Antoine equation, and the Antoine equation used the Antoine constants based on this equation. So we used the VLOOKUP function to extract the data from the table. And if you remember, we used the drop-down list to get or to pick the element, instead of writing it by hand, to prevent any errors in the writing the names. So in case I'm not using the drop-down list and I am writing the name by myself, so what this function does, it is looking for this name in this table, and it's extracting the A and B and C from the table. So I wrote ammonia, so it worked. But in case I wrote the name by mistake, I have a typo in the name, so I put another A, for instance, at the end. So I would see this, and this NA, it is not available. It's a value is not available to the formula. The formula cannot give you an output because there is no such name in the range that you are showing or you are selecting from. So in a case like this, I need to make sure that the reference that I'm looking at is correct. So I need to review the input that I wrote and make sure that it is a right input. The last type of errors, it is actually a very strange error, and I never knew about it until before I make this video. To understand this error, let's say I have a sum, the sum function, or average, or anything that does calculation for a big number of cells. I know that I can calculate the sum of these cells, And if I want to add another range, I would do this. So it's going to calculate the sum of all these cells. It's a very known thing. But what is new, was very, very new to me, is that you can write the formula in a different way. You can write it like this, and instead of putting a comma, you can put a space, and then select another range like this. So what you ask Excel to do when you write the formula this way is to get the sum of the intersection of these two ranges. It's very, very new to me, and I think it's new to most of the viewers. So this is what the formula will do. It will get the sum of the intersection, which is 44 plus 45 is going to be 89. And this is what we are going to get from here. It's very new, but anyways, it's something good to know. But in case you put the other range this way, then there is no intersection between these two ranges. So this very weird error would show up. It is again, it's the first time for me to see this error. Is the null error. So it tells you that there is no the ranges in the formula do not intersect. So there is no intersection between these two ranges, so it cannot give you an output. So again, the very common errors that you would see are the errors that we mentioned in the first sheet. It is the narrow column, circular reference, the num when you have mathematical error, or there is no mathematical output for the function. There is dividing by zero. The name that you wrote has a grammatical error, or a mistake in the spelling, and the value when you are giving a wrong input for the output that you are looking at, or for the function that you're using. Again, this in A, it's not available. You need to check the inputs that you put to make sure that the input gives an output, and the null, that you have no intersection between the ranges, that must have some intersection to work with the function. So these are the common errors that you would see. I hope it's useful, and I'll see you in the next video, inshallah. Goodbye.